Hey guys, we are in the woods today, Ember and I, for our daily hike that we take. And we come to these woods here. And this park is called Mendon Ponds Park in Rochester, New York. We get our exercise here, we hike the hills, and we have a good time. This is Ember's absolute favorite thing to do, is to hike in the woods. And she loves it, and as soon as I get home at night and walk in the door, she's ready to go and gives me that look like, are we ready? Let's go. So what we're going to do out here today, guys, is I was tagged by Louise Gardner, and it's called a first time tag. So what it is a bunch of questions that ask about your first time with some things, and Louise had tagged me and several other very nice people because she said that it was a great way to get to know her subscribers. And in going through the questions, when I just glanced over them, she's exactly right. So this is a little bit of a change. I mean, we're still in the woods, but a little bit of a change from bushcrafting and starting a fire and giving some campfire shout outs and things like that. But if you don't have variety, if you don't have a variety in your videos, you don't have a variety in your subscribers and what you do in life, things get stale and things don't progress and you don't move forward. And you miss out on a lot in life if there isn't variety. So I am going to attempt to hold the camera with one hand, hold Ember and her leash in my other hand, and then read the questions off of this list as we hike. And we'll just have a good time out here while I answer Louise's tag, and then I'll tag a couple people at the end of the video. So let's flip it around here. Hey guys. Okay, so series of questions for the first time tag and a video response to Louise Gardner. Do I still talk to my first love? No, I do not. I have not spoken with my first love since the early 90s, probably 1992, I would say. We were young and in love for high school kids, and it didn't end particularly friendly, so no, we don't talk. We haven't talked in many, many years. What was my first job? My first job was other than working on the farms, when I was young, we would work on farms at my grandparents' house, but we weren't paid for those. So I'm going to assume this is my first paying job. My first paying job was at Burger King at a mall called Shoppingtown Mall. I was 15 years old and lived in a rural suburb of Syracuse. Suburb I lived in was rural, so what I had to do was actually take the bus. And it was about a half an hour away. I'd had to take the bus from Chittenango, New York, where I grew up, to Shoppingtown Mall. And that was my first job. What was your first car? My first car was a 1986 Chevy Chevette. Wasn't the coolest car in the world at the time at all. But it was my first car, and I was still in high school, and I was happy to have that, and it ran really, really well. I mean, it was a tremendous running car. I wouldn't be surprised if it still runs to this day. Who was the first person I text today? First person I text was my son Max. He recently had a job interview at McDonald's. Very proud of him. And I wanted to know if he heard anything back. So I texted him, has he heard anything back from McDonald's? And he said no, and I also text to not be afraid to give him a call and follow up on that. First person I thought of this morning was Julie. I woke up to Ember barking outside, and I just had wondered how long Julie had her out. Julie's up before I am, and she leaves the house before I do. But I wondered how long she had Ember out, and if she was going to let her in pretty soon because she was barking. Neighbors were probably running around or something. So Julie was the first person I thought of this morning, and most mornings. Who was my first grade teacher? My first grade teacher was Mrs. Harcourt. And I remember that because oddly enough, and remember guys, this was a whole different time in the world, Mrs. Harcourt used to spank me when I was doing something wrong. And I remember when she said, don't get a drink out of the fountain, and I got a drink out of the fountain, and she grabbed my arm and swung me around and spanked me. And I was shocked. But then she did it more times throughout the year, and I never saw her do it to the other kids, so I always thought that was kind of strange. But yes, I remember my first grade teacher, Mrs. Harcourt, for that reason very well. My first plane ride. What was my first plane ride? My parents met. My mom's Vietnamese, as I had mentioned before, and my mom and dad met in the Vietnam War. They then left Vietnam and moved to Taiwan. I was then born in Taiwan, and my first plane ride was from Taiwan to Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn, New York, a Navy base in Brooklyn, New York, where my dad was stationed after Taiwan. So that was my first plane ride as just a baby. Who's my best friend, and do I still talk with them? My best friend ever in the world, his name was Matt. And I met him when I was going to Brockport State College. And I'll get into this another time. Long story and so much to tell about Matt and why he was my best friend, and my brother that wasn't my brother, you know? My best friend. And no, I don't talk to him because between semesters in college, Matt died in a motorcycle accident. So that's going to lead me to some other stuff on the video here. But my best friend's Matt, and no, unfortunately, I don't talk to him to this day. Where was my first sleepover? Our families were always really close, and all of us cousins always spent the night at my grandmother's house on my dad's side of the family. So we lived about 6 hours away when we first moved here. So my first sleepover with my family were Christmas times. We'd travel up to Syracuse from Brooklyn and spend Christmas week there, I'd say, or something. But then after that, on occasion, I would spend the night there by myself or with my little brother. So my grandmother's house, where she put us to work, and that's where a few years after that, when we spent the night or stayed weekends, that's when we were doing the farm work and chopping wood and all that stuff. But it was fun. All us cousins had a great time in doing it. Who was the first person that I talked to today? The first person I talked to today was Sydney, Julie's daughter, Sydney. She's in 11th grade, and as I'm getting up out of bed at maybe 6:45, 10 to 7, she's putting the finishing touches on getting ready. So she's zipping up her boots and putting on her sweatshirt and getting ready to go, and we just say hey. When we see each other in the morning, we just say hey. So she was the first person I talked to this morning. Whose wedding was I in for the first time? That would be my Aunt Pat and Uncle Robert. I was just a young kid, and they asked me to be in their wedding, and I didn't know what it entailed at the time, but it was very fun. I had talked about my Aunt Pat before, and she was always very into us kids. There was a bunch of cousins, a bunch of us, and she was always very into us. She's the one who first taught me about bushcraft, wild edibles, took all us kids camping, taught me what outdoor adventure was all about. My Aunt Pat was great. So her and her husband was the first wedding I was ever in. What's the first thing I did this morning? The very first thing I did this morning when I came downstairs was put a K-cup in the Keurig and brew some coffee. Take a vitamin while the coffee's brewing, and then drink some strong black coffee. That's the very first thing I do most every morning. What was my first concert? I believe my first concert was 1992 or 93. Pink Floyd at the Syracuse Carrier Dome. And I believe it was in support of their Division Bell album at the time. It's either that or a concert that I saw that was Def Leppard at Weedsport outside of Syracuse outdoors. But I think the Pink Floyd concert was first. What was my first broken bone? I've had serious sprains throughout sports, but I've never had a broken bone, fortunately. Okay, sorry about that, guys. We get some other people on the trail here, and I just have to keep a little closer of a watch on Ember. So I've never broken a bone. I've never had a broken bone, thankfully. My first piercing, late high school, me and the wrestling team, we were all piercing our left ear. So we were all taking a needle. I don't even think we sterilized it, and we all punctured each other's left ear, so we all had a left ear pierce. Strange, right? My first foreign country was Taiwan, because that's where I was born. So that's kind of a built-in answer for me. What's the first movie I saw in the theaters? The first movie that I saw in the movie theaters was Superman 1 with Christopher Reeves and Margot Kidder and Gene Hackman. Great movie, even still to this day. But we were living in Fort Hamilton, Brooklyn on the Navy base, and my dad took me to see that. And it was such a good movie. And I remember that so well. My dad was big into taking me to movies. He also took me to see Empire Strikes Back and a couple other movies. My first detention. I was in 8th grade. We had a substitute English teacher, and some guys that I was sitting by were screwing around. And, you know, horseplay while the real teacher was out and the sub was in. Well, the next day, apparently she made a list for the teacher, and the next day the teacher came in and said, all the guys on this list right here are in detention. Well, it was all the guys that I was sitting around and me. And I didn't do anything. I mean, I would tell you if I did. I didn't do anything. And then when we were sitting in detention, the English teacher actually said to me that he was the most disappointed and shocked in me. But it was guilt by association. I was just sitting by those guys. I was quiet. I was a quiet kid. But I didn't argue with them. I didn't say, oh, well, I didn't do anything. I didn't get into any of that. I just shrugged my shoulders and took it. But I was nailed for a crime that I didn't commit. 8th grade English class, my first detention. My first roommate. My first roommate was Matt, was my best friend Matt in college. Before that, after high school, I wouldn't call them roommates. I usually lived with girlfriends. So being that they were girlfriends at the time, I won't refer to them as roommates. So my first roommate was, once I got to Brockport State, was Matt. My first roommate, my first real best friend. Just a very, very cool guy. He was a criminal justice major, and he was going places, you know. He was absolutely going places in life. He had his goals all set and determined, and I didn't. So it had always shocked me that he was the one out of the two of us to take a Pasadena and lose his life. Almost done here, guys. The first lesson I learned is, what was the first lesson you learned is the next question, and it's tied into that, guys. You learn a lot of lessons as kids, but this is more of a hard lesson that sticks with you through life, and that's the impermanence of everything, and how it's very difficult to attach to things because everything is so impermanent, you know? I had recognized the impermanence of everything, but really wasn't able to put words or context to it. You know, I wasn't able to put a name with a face until I started to study philosophy and Western religion and some things like that. And the concept of Zen, or the Buddhist way of thinking, is that attachment leads to suffering, contributes to suffering, and the way to not attach is to recognize the impermanence, that everything is impermanent. And that's been a hard lesson for me to learn, but it's something that sticks with me to this day. And it's not grim, it's more to the fact of Things are always fleeting on us, guys. Life is moving right along. If we don't grab things and do them, if we don't grab things and enjoy them, if we don't do everything that we want to do when there's time to do them, we're going to miss out. I mean, life doesn't wait for us. It just moves right along. And it's very easy not to do the things that you've always wanted to do, not to be as nice as you always wanted to be. That's why I always say be nice. I mean, we're not here that long, guys. And finally, who was the first beauty person or beauty channel I watched? Well, that would be Louise Gardner. Louise Gardner's channel is the first beauty channel that I have ever watched. I had discovered her through another channel, and we had subbed each other, and of course when you get a new sub you want to check out that channel. And I think it's a channel more on Louise's personality and family and outgoing nature than it is about beauty. I think it should be called the Louise Personality Channel with some beauty mixed in. But beauty's a major theme on her channel, so I'll say that it was Louise that was the first beauty channel that I watched. And as you can see, guys, I could use all the beauty tips that I can get. So through Louise I then met other people, and the variety is just there. Variety of channels, as I mentioned earlier, variety of people that we get along with. It just enhances life to open up and take in new things and take in new people. So let me really quick get to a couple tags here. If Ember were to stop here for 1 second. Let's see if we can get Ember on camera while I'm trying to do this. I don't have a selfie stick or anything, guys. I'm trying to do this just with my 2 hands here. Okay, guys, the 2 channels that I want to tag are Eternity for Me 1. She has a great channel, and she has one of the best voices on YouTube. I would love to hear her do the first time tag. And then my friend Christine Lowery. So Christine Lowery and Eternity for Me 1, you are the 2 young ladies that I'm going to tag. And I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. We will talk to you again down the road. Say bye, Ember. Ember, say bye.